I met Jeremy about, I think 4 years ago. I couldn't help but want to help Peace One Day because his energy is infectious, and I'm sure some of you who haven't heard him before will agree with me. After that presentation, everybody in this room, I hope, will feel that they want to contribute to Peace One Day. Today is probably a very apt day for us to have this conference, considering what's going on in Libya. And our thoughts and prayers must be with the Libyan people, and I hope that Peace One Day will be the first non-governmental organization in that country to help the healing process for the Libyan people once peace hopefully breaks out in that country. 36 years ago, I was standing in a very different place. I will never forget, as an 8-year-old boy, standing in Baghdad International Airport, holding my mother's hand, witnessing my father attempt to flee that country. His only crime was that he was Kurdish and didn't wish to belong to the Ba'ath Party. In those days, you could see the planes on the tarmac from a big window. And as the plane was about to taxi out, a big truck full of soldiers sped up to the plane and stopped at the bottom. And I'll never forget looking up at my mother when tears began to roll down her cheeks because we were convinced that they were going to drag my father off that plane. After a few moments, the soldiers came back down, and instead they dragged another man off that plane. We later learned from my father that they took the man sitting next to him. When the plane took off, my father ordered a bottle of Black Label whiskey and finished it by the time the plane had landed in London. He was very lucky because he happened to have connections and friends in London who could help him get on that plane. And he arrived in England with very little money, but with a lot of hope and determination in his heart. And what England gave my family was freedom and opportunity. So when we in politics talk about those two words, to my family, they weren't just words. They changed our whole life. They gave us a whole new opportunity of life in this country. And that's part of my motivation of supporting Peace One Day, because when I reflect on what could have happened to my family, I think of all those other families around the world. And if we can just, for one day, get people to stop and think about what they're doing, maybe, just maybe, we can help them better their lives. I then went to school and university where I qualified as a chemical engineer from UCL, never worked as a chemical engineer, went into marketing instead. Although politics was always something of a passion for me, I joined the Conservative Collegiate Forum at the time at university and then became a councillor not too far from here in southwest London in Wandsworth for 12 years. And in 1999-2000, I met an extraordinary man called Stephen Shakespeare, which you couldn't script in a book when you realise that I now represent the great bard, William Shakespeare, in Stratford-On-Avon. Stephen and I had the idea for YouGov. And the idea wasn't one that was going to be commercially viable, but we were passionate about it. And that passion came from the name itself. We felt that the internet was beginning to give the opportunity to the citizen to have a larger stake in that equilibrium between the executive, the state, and the citizen. And that equilibrium was shifting in favor of people. If only you could structure their opinions and deliver them to the executive being government or corporations, if you can structure that opinion, then that must be a good thing for society. And that's where the whole idea of YouGov came from. We launched the business, and I'll never forget at the launch party where we were excited, energized, and very hopeful that we would raise some money. People came to the launch, thought it was a great idea, and 2 weeks later, lastminute.com bombed, and the dot-com bubble had burst. So life became very difficult. There was no money around. All the people who had promised us some money, very, I think, fairly turned around and said, look, we can't help you because we've lost so much money on other ventures. This thing is not something we can now support. So we had to dig deep to keep our idea alive, our passion in the idea alive, and we had to remortgage our homes to keep the business afloat, which is probably the best decision we ever made in our lives. The company was up and running. People told us it's difficult to take on the giants of the world research industry, these great big names that you're all familiar with, when you are two guys in a shed working out of a garden in Great College Street in SW1. Well, we did. And the reason we did was because we absolutely believed that the method that we were using would be recognized as being superior. The idea that you can collect the views of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people and structure them so that you can make real sense out of it must be a very powerful one, especially for the executive, because people who were in positions of power wanted to hear what the truth was, wanted to hear what people were thinking and saying and acting upon in a reliable way. And that's the success story of YouGov. Our real breakthrough didn't come till about a year and a half into the business. We never raised a single invoice for about a year and a half, which I've got to tell you, if any of you have been through that process, it is the most depressing thing, going into an office with a bunch of young people who are brilliant and are absolutely energized to do the right thing, yet you know you haven't got much money left and you're constantly hemorrhaging money. But the breakthrough eventually came, and it came out of an unexpected source, which was really a think tank, which was the Economic and Social Research Council, which had funding for the 2001 general election, and said, would we parallel, said, you know, what you're doing is really interesting, would you parallel what you're doing online with the offline guys, the face-to-face and telephone? And we jumped at the chance. We were drowning rats then. We jumped at it, and they told us right at the end, just before we signed the contract, oh, by the way, we've allocated the money to the other two, so there's no money for you in the first place. We still did it. We wiped the floor with the opposition. We were within 0.70% of the final result of that particular outcome, that election. And still people found it hard to believe. In fact, the great Bob Worcester of Moray wrote in his book that YouGov and the two young founders had made a valiant effort and a great result to be the most accurate in that election. But I believe that internet polling will be voodoo polling and will never be taken up by the world. How wrong he was at the time, and thank God for that too, because it gave us that bit more time to keep building the business to where it is today, which it operates in 3 continents. It has over 400 or 500 people now working for it, and I'm very proud to have handed over the baton to Stephen Shakespeare, who's now the chief executive, when I was selected a year ago to represent or to stand for Stratford-On-Avon, and then when I was elected in May to Parliament as the member for Stratford-On-Avon. I just want to end by saying a few words about the work we're doing in Parliament with Peace One Day. Jeremy and Jude very kindly dedicated a whole day to working with me in Parliament, and we got them in and got my colleagues, other parliamentarians from all parties, along to come and listen to Jeremy and Jude and watch some of the stuff you've watched today. And following that meeting, we've decided as parliamentarians that we would form a working group to continue to push the initiative of making the 21st September World Peace Day. And I think we will succeed certainly in our work here, and hope to talk to other parliamentarians from other countries around Europe and the rest of the world. And Jeremy, I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this, but On Friday, I had an email from the Minister, Henry Bellingham, to say that he'd very much like to see you and me to talk about the plans that the Foreign Office are putting together for the Olympic truce. And so we are doing a lot of work to make sure that Peace One Day, Peace Day, does become institutionalized. And I'm sure we're going to succeed, because when I look at Jeremy, I keep remembering that one line that a very wise old man once told me when I was starting YouGov. He said, "Young man, the only ceiling is in your mind." Thank you very much for listening.